The darkness before dawn on June 4, 1942, held secrets that would shatter an empire. 4 Japanese carriers cut through Pacific swells 240 miles northwest of Midway Atoll. Commander Minoru Genda stood on Akagi's bridge wearing pajamas. Pneumonia racked his body. Yet he remained at his post, as the most powerful naval armada Japan had ever assembled, prepared for what they believed would be their final victory. Around them stretched a force that defied imagination. 11 battleships rode the waves like floating fortresses. Over 200 vessels formed an iron curtain across the ocean. This fleet had never tasted defeat. Not once in 6 months of war had they failed to achieve their objectives. The mathematics seemed to favor them completely. 8 carriers against America's 3. 11 battleships, while the Americans had none at Midway. 248 aircraft ready to strike. Every Japanese officer that morning carried absolute confidence in their hearts. What none of them suspected was the trap closing around them. Admiral Nimitz had been reading their most secret communications for weeks. American codebreakers worked in basement rooms beneath Pearl Harbor. They knew exactly what was coming. They knew when it would arrive. Most importantly, they knew how to stop it. The collapse of Japanese naval supremacy would begin within hours. 4 irreplaceable carriers would burn and sink before the day ended. 357 of Japan's finest pilots and crew members would perish in the flames. The myth of invincibility that had carried them across the Pacific would die in 6 minutes of coordinated attack. But that morning the Japanese felt unstoppable. Behind them lay 6 months of victories that exceeded their wildest projections. Pearl Harbor had seen 8 American battleships sunk or damaged. The Philippines had fallen after brief resistance. Singapore had surrendered with 85,000 British troops. Burma belonged to the rising sun. An empire spanning 20 million square miles testified to their military genius. Yet beneath this confidence lay fatal assumptions. Japanese intelligence believed America had at most 2 operational carriers in the Pacific. Both were thought to be operating in the South Pacific, far from Midway. The Yorktown had suffered heavy damage at the Battle of the Coral Sea. Surely she would need months of repair work. Complete radio silence had been maintained throughout their approach. This guaranteed surprise, according to every tactical manual they possessed. None suspected that their enemies had been tracking every movement for days. The Americans knew their routes. They knew their targets. They knew exactly when the attack would begin. Station Hypo operated in stifling heat beneath Pearl Harbor. Commander Joseph Rochefort led teams of cryptanalysts who worked around the clock. By May 1942, they were reading portions of 15 to 20% of Japanese naval communications. That was enough to piece together the enemy's complete battle plan. The breakthrough had come through careful deception. When Japanese messages repeatedly mentioned AF as their objective, Rochefort suspected this meant Midway. To confirm his theory, Captain Jasper Holmes suggested a clever trap. Midway transmitted an uncoded emergency message reporting water distillation problems. 2 days later, Japanese intelligence reported that AF was short of fresh water. The trap was set. Lieutenant Commander Edwin Layton served as Admiral Nimitz's intelligence officer. He later testified to Congress about what they knew. The American commanders had detailed information about Japanese objectives. They knew the routes the enemy would take. They understood the timetables being followed. They could predict which ships would be where with remarkable accuracy. This intelligence advantage extended far beyond simple locations. American analysts determined the complete Japanese order of battle. They knew the attack would come on June 4th or 5. They even knew the approach routes that would be used. This information allowed Nimitz to position his carriers northeast of Midway In the one sector, Japanese search patterns would cover inadequately. Meanwhile, an industrial miracle was occurring at Pearl Harbor. The Yorktown had limped home from the Coral Sea with a bomb hole through her flight deck. Near misses had ruptured her fuel tanks. Japanese intelligence estimated she would need 3 months for repairs. Pearl Harbor's repair crews accomplished the job in 72 hours. 1,400 workers labored continuously from May 27 to 29. Repair teams remained aboard as she sailed, continuing their work during the voyage to Midway. The speed of this repair seemed impossible to Japanese planners, who required weeks for similar damage. At 04:30 hours, Admiral Nagumo ordered the launch of his first strike against Midway. 100 aircraft rose from the carrier decks. 36 Kate torpedo bombers led the formation. 36 Val dive bombers followed closely behind. 36 Zero fighters provided escort. The launch proceeded with the flawless precision that 6 months of victories had perfected. But Nagumo made a critical error that morning. Instead of launching 22 search planes as doctrine required, he sent out only 7. An 8th plane from the cruiser Tone launched 30 minutes late due to catapult problems. This seemingly minor delay would prove catastrophic. At 05:34, PBY Catalina flying boats from Midway spotted the Japanese fleet. At 05:53, Midway's radar detected the incoming strike. Every flyable aircraft on the island scrambled immediately. Marine fighters raced to intercept. Torpedo bombers and dive bombers lifted off. Even B-17 flying fortresses joined the desperate defense. The Americans had been expecting this attack for days. The first Japanese strike hit Midway at 06:30. Lieutenant Joichi Tominaga led the attackers with methodical precision, but Midway's defenses proved stronger than intelligence had suggested. The airfields remained operational despite heavy bombing. At 700, Tominaga radioed a message that would seal his fleet's fate. There is need for a second attack wave. This message forced Admiral Nagumo to make the decision that would determine the battle's outcome. His second-wave aircraft were armed with armor-piercing bombs and torpedoes for attacking ships. With no enemy fleet detected, he ordered them rearmed with fragmentation bombs for ground attack at 07:15. This decision, recorded in surviving Japanese logs, initiated chaos on the hangar decks. Japanese doctrine called for struck ordnance to be returned to magazines below decks, but time constraints led to a fatal shortcut. Bombs and torpedoes were simply stacked on the hangar decks, creating floating ammunition dumps. What should have been secure storage became death traps, waiting for a single spark. At 07:28, the delayed search plane from Tone finally transmitted its report. Sight what appears to be 10 enemy surface ships, bearing 010 degrees distance, 240 miles from Midway. The vague report triggered frantic activity throughout the Japanese fleet. Were these the carriers they feared most? At 07:45, Nagumo demanded clarification about ship types. The response wouldn't come for 30 critical minutes. During this crucial period, 3 American torpedo squadrons found the Japanese carriers. Their attacks appeared suicidal to any observer. Obsolete TBD Devastators flew straight and level at 120 knots. Zero fighters capable of 330 knots dove on them like hawks among sparrows. Torpedo Squadron 8 from the Hornet attacked first. Of 15 aircraft, 14 were shot down immediately. Ensign George Gay became the sole survivor, watching from the water as his squadron was annihilated. His after-action report described Zeros making multiple passes through the formation, methodically destroying each aircraft. Torpedo Squadron 6 from Enterprise lost 10 of 14 aircraft. Torpedo Squadron 3 from Yorktown lost 10 of 12. Not a single torpedo found its target. Japanese after-action reports dismissed these attacks as brave but futile. What they failed to realize was that these heroic failures had pulled every Zero fighter down to sea level, leaving no high-altitude protection. At 10:20, Lieutenant Commander Wade McCluskey's dive bombers from Enterprise arrived overhead. McCluskey had searched beyond his calculated intercept point. When he found nothing, he made a logical decision to turn north. Following the wake of a destroyer racing to rejoin the fleet led him directly to his targets. According to his after-action report, the carrier decks were spotted with aircraft, apparently being readied for launch. No fighters were visible at altitude. The trap was perfect. At 10:22, the attack that would change history began. Lieutenant Richard Best's 1,000-pound bomb penetrated Akagi's flight deck and exploded in the hangar among the stacked ordnance. Within seconds, induced explosions ripped through the ship. Simultaneously, Yorktown's dive bombers struck Soryu. 3 bombs turned her into an inferno within 20 seconds. Kaga took 4 direct hits from Enterprise bombers. The first penetrated near the forward elevator and exploded among fueled aircraft. By 10:28, 3 Japanese carriers were mortally wounded. The mathematics were stunning. Of 41 dive bombers attacking, only 3 were shot down. In 6 minutes, the balance of naval power in the Pacific had shifted permanently. The Japanese carriers died slowly, their destruction documented in horrifying detail by surviving officers. Akagi burned for nearly 12 hours. Captain Taijiro Aoki remained aboard attempting salvage until Oro 200 on June 5, when Yamamoto personally ordered abandonment. At Oro 450, Japanese destroyers torpedoed her with 4 Type 93 torpedoes to prevent capture. She sank at Oro 520 with 267 dead. Kaga's fires proved uncontrollable with ruptured fire mains. Commander Takahisa Amagai ordered abandoned ship at 1640. She exploded and sank at 1925 with 801 casualties, the highest of the 4 carriers. Soryu sank at 1913 on June 4 after burning for 9 hours. Captain Ryusaku Yanagimoto chose to remain aboard. According to survivor testimonies, he was last seen on the bridge as the ship went down. Casualties numbered 711. Hiryu, the sole survivor of the morning attack, launched 2 strikes that mortally wounded Yorktown. But at 1700, American dive bombers found her and scored 4 hits. She sank at Aro 900 on June 5. Admiral Tamon Yamaguchi and Captain Tomeo Kaku chose to go down with their ship. Losses totaled 416. Yorktown's survival demonstrated American damage control superiority. Despite taking 3 bomb hits from Hiryu's first strike and 2 torpedo hits from the second, she remained afloat for 2 days. Only when submarine I-168 torpedoed her on June 6 did she finally sink on June 7. Total American losses were 307 dead, 1 carrier, 1 destroyer, and 150 aircraft. Japanese losses were 357 dead, 4 fleet carriers, 1 heavy cruiser, 248 aircraft, and 110 irreplaceable veteran pilots. The disparity revealed more than tactical success. It exposed fundamental differences in military philosophy and industrial capacity. Post-war analysis revealed the completeness of American intelligence superiority. A National Security Agency historical study, declassified in 2006, confirmed that Station Hypo provided the accurate date of attack within 1 day. They knew the complete Japanese order of battle. They understood approach routes and deployment patterns. They even knew the Japanese plan to occupy Midway after its capture. The study concluded that no military operation in history had begun with such complete intelligence about enemy intentions. This advantage allowed the Americans to position their forces perfectly while maintaining the element of surprise despite being outnumbered. At 23:55, on June 4th, Admiral Yamamoto canceled Operation MI and ordered withdrawal. He commanded the super battleship Yamato 300 miles behind the carriers with the most powerful surface fleet ever assembled. yet he remained powerless to affect the outcome. According to official action reports, Yamamoto considered a night surface engagement using his battleships. His staff calculated they could reach the American fleet by 0200. But, without air cover and facing American carriers at dawn, the risk was deemed unacceptable. The retreat marked the first time in the war that a Japanese operation had been cancelled due to enemy action. Midway's impact exceeded the immediate losses. Japan's strategic initiative in the Pacific ended on June 4, 1942. Every subsequent operation would be defensive or reactive. The pilot losses proved irreplaceable. The 110 aircrew lost averaged over 800 flight hours each. Many were veterans since the China incident of 1937. Japan's pre-war training system produced only 100 pilots annually. The U.S. Navy was already training 2,500 monthly. The mathematics of attrition became inescapable. Japanese naval doctrine based on the decisive battle concept derived from their 1905 victory at Tsushima proved obsolete against American industrial warfare. Verified production statistics revealed the hopelessness of Japan's position after Midway. In carrier production, Japan completed 12 carriers from Midway to war's end. America completed 141, including 17 fleet carriers and 124 escort carriers. In aircraft production from 1942 to 1945, Japan produced approximately 65,000 aircraft. The United States produced 29,700. By 1944, Japanese pilots averaged 150 to 200 flight hours before combat. American pilots averaged 600-plus hours. Industrial capacity told the story. U.S. national income was 17 times Japan's before the war. America provided two-thirds of all Allied military equipment during the conflict. Japanese post-war technical analysis revealed systematic vulnerabilities in their carrier design. Closed hangar decks trapped explosions. Inadequate fire suppression systems failed under stress. Poor damage control procedures turned minor hits into catastrophic losses. Insufficient ventilation systems spread fires rapidly. Their aircraft also showed critical weaknesses. Zero fighters lacked armor and self-sealing fuel tanks. High performance came through sacrificing survivability. Japan had no effective pilot rescue system. Downed aviators were simply lost. Operational deficiencies compounded technical problems. Inadequate search patterns using 7 planes versus the doctrinal 22 left huge gaps in coverage. Poor radio discipline, despite maintaining silence, revealed positions. Inflexible tactical doctrine prevented adaptation when circumstances changed. American damage control demonstrated by Yorktown's survival through multiple attacks reflected superior training. All crew trained in firefighting techniques. Equipment included CO2 systems, foam generators, and portable pumps. Design featured redundant systems and better compartmentalization. Doctrine emphasized ship preservation versus honorable death. Japanese carriers proved fatally vulnerable to single hits due to induced explosions of their own ordnance. This problem was identified but never corrected throughout the war. The role of intelligence in the American victory cannot be overstated. According to Admiral Nimitz's post-war assessment, had they lacked early information about Japanese movements and been caught with carrier forces dispersed, the Battle of Midway would have ended differently. Station Hypo's achievement went beyond breaking codes. They provided actionable intelligence that allowed precise positioning of American carriers. Midway's defenses were prepared in advance. Resources were conserved by avoiding Japanese feints. Tactical surprise was achieved despite numerical inferiority. Post-war interrogations revealed systematic Japanese command problems. Inadequate reconnaissance was documented in action reports. Vacillation over rearming was confirmed by multiple witnesses. Failure to launch available aircraft when under attack showed tactical inflexibility. Poor coordination with supporting forces reduced effectiveness. Strategic errors multiplied these tactical failures. An overly complex plan required perfect timing across millions of square miles of ocean. Forces were divided for simultaneous operations. American capabilities were consistently underestimated. Intelligence warnings about increased American radio traffic were ignored. The loss of veteran pilots at Midway triggered a cascade effect documented in Japanese training records. Before Midway, Japanese pilot training required 500 to 700 hours over 2 years. After Midway, emergency programs provided only 150 to 200 hours over 4 months. By 1944, some pilots deployed with under 100 hours of experience. American pilot quality improved continuously throughout the war. In 1942, pilots averaged 400 hours of training. By 1943, this increased to 500 hours. By 1944, American pilots received over 600 hours of training before deployment. The experience gap became insurmountable. At the 1944 Battle of the Philippine Sea, Japanese pilots averaged 200 hours of experience versus American pilots, with over 600 hours. The result was 346 Japanese aircraft lost versus 30 American. Midway forced Japanese recognition of American industrial supremacy. According to captured Japanese documents, their planners calculated that matching U.S. carrier production required 300% of total Japanese steel production. Matching aircraft production required 400% of aluminum capacity. Matching pilot training required fuel oil Japan simply didn't possess. The mathematics of defeat were inescapable. Midway's effects rippled through every subsequent Pacific operation. At Guadalcanal in August 1942, Japan committed forces piecemeal, unable to concentrate the carrier power lost at Midway. At Santa Cruz in October 1942, Japan achieved tactical victory, but lost 99 aircrew versus 26 American in unsustainable attrition. At the Philippine Sea in June 1944, Japan's rebuilt carrier force was destroyed, losing 476 aircraft and 450 aircrew in the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. Midway exposed technological disparities that widened throughout the war. Americans had shipboard radar, while Japanese relied on visual observation. American TBS talk between ships' systems allowed coordination. Japanese used flags and lights. Americans read JN-25 code, while Japanese never broke American naval codes. Americans improved designs continuously, while Japanese couldn't retool factories efficiently. Post-war interrogations and memoirs provide authenticated perspectives on the battle's impact. Captain Taijiro Aoki testified that induced explosions from improperly stored ordnance doomed his ship. A single bomb hit became catastrophic due to procedural failures. Commander Yasuji Watanabe confirmed in interrogation that Yamamoto immediately recognized the war was lost after Midway, though this was never stated publicly. Ensign George Gay's detailed after-action report provided crucial information about Japanese carrier operations during the attack. Modern historians, particularly Jonathan Parshall and Anthony Tully in their 2005 work Shattered Sword, have corrected many persistent myths about the battle. The myth that Japanese carriers were 5 minutes from launching when attacked has been disproven. Operational records show 30 to 40 minutes minimum would have been required. The myth that Nagumo should have launched a partial strike ignores Japanese doctrine, which required coordinated attacks. Partial strikes weren't practiced or considered tactically sound. The myth that Japanese reconnaissance was unlucky misses the point. Inadequate search patterns were doctrinal, not accidental. These myths have obscured the real lessons of Midway for decades. Midway's impact extended far beyond the Pacific War itself. Strategic lessons emerged that shaped naval warfare permanently. Intelligence superiority could overcome numerical disadvantage. Industrial capacity determined the outcome of prolonged conflicts. Technological adaptation mattered more than initial superiority. Logistics and production trumped tactical brilliance in modern warfare. Doctrinal changes occurred immediately after the battle. American carriers were never again concentrated as they had been at Midway. Emphasis shifted to radar and electronic warfare capabilities. Damage control became a priority equal to offensive capability. Pilot preservation was prioritized over death before dishonor concepts. Admiral Nimitz's official report concluded that the Battle of Midway was essentially a victory of intelligence. The Americans knew Japanese intentions, strength, and schedule. The Japanese knew nothing about American preparations. This intelligence advantage proved decisive in the battle's outcome. Japanese naval historian Mitsuru Yoshida later wrote that after Midway, Japan was defending, not attacking. The decisive Battle of the Pacific War had been fought on June 4, 1942. The U.S. Strategic Bombing Survey, analyzing Japanese records after the war, determined that the Japanese Navy never recovered from Midway. Every subsequent operation was constrained by the losses of June 4 to 5, 1942. Statistical analysis reveals the battle's true scope. Japanese forces included 4 fleet carriers, 2 light carriers, 11 battleships, 16 cruisers, and 46 destroyers, with 248 carrier aircraft. American forces totaled 3 fleet carriers, 0 battleships, 8 cruisers, and 15 destroyers, with 233 carrier aircraft, plus 127 land-based aircraft. Japanese losses were 4 fleet carriers, 1 heavy cruiser, 200 aircraft, and 357 dead, including 110 aircrew. American losses were 1 fleet carrier, 1 destroyer, 150 aircraft, and 307 dead. The time factor shows Japanese supremacy from 0430 to 0928, lasting 5 hours. The American decisive attack from 1022 to 1028 took 6 minutes. Total battle duration ran from 0430 June 4 to 900 June 5, approximately 28 hours. Midway stands as history's proof that intelligence and preparation defeat surprise and strength. Industrial capacity trumps warrior spirit in prolonged conflict. Technological adaptation overcomes initial advantages. Hubris remains warfare's deadliest enemy, regardless of era or technology. The Japanese Navy that attacked Midway on June 4th represented the most powerful carrier force ever assembled to that point. By sunset, that force was broken beyond repair. The Americans achieved victory not through luck, but through intelligence preparation and industrial might. In 6 minutes of coordinated dive bomber attacks, the Pacific War's ultimate outcome was determined. Every subsequent battle would be fought with the knowledge that American intelligence and production capacity had already decided the result. Japan would fight for 3 more years with tremendous courage and skill. But the possibility of victory died with 4 carriers northwest of Midway on June 4, 1942. The battle proved that modern naval warfare had become a contest of intelligence technology and industrial production rather than traditional military virtues alone. Japan brought superior tactics experience and fighting spirit. America brought superior intelligence and the ability to replace losses faster than they occurred. In that collision between old and new forms of warfare, the future defeated the past decisively. Midway remains the U.S. Navy's greatest victory, not just for the tactical success achieved, but for validating the proposition that democracies with industrial might and technological innovation could overcome militaristic expertise and warrior traditions. The Japanese fleet approached Midway expecting easy victory based on 6 months of unbroken success. Instead, they encountered the beginning of their empire's end. The mathematics of modern warfare had shifted permanently. Intelligence preparation and industrial capacity now mattered more than courage, skill, and tradition.